I want to start by saying that I am not a hero. I want to get that out of the way right now because by the time this story ends, some of you are going to want to make me one. People have already started. There are memes. Apparently my face is on something called an honor tile in the 7th Verti Citadel, which is both flattering and deeply, profoundly embarrassing, and I need to address that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning. The part where I was standing in a corridor that smelled like burnt copper, and something floral I couldn't identify, like someone had crossed a lightning bolt with a field of lavender. And I realized, with the particular kind of slow-dawning horror that only comes to you at 4 in the morning after 18 hours of travel, that I had absolutely no idea where I was. Let me set the scene for you. The Vethara Station, Orbital Platform 9. 312 kilometers above the surface of a planet called Drekon Minor, which, according to the orientation packet they gave us when the Terran Auxiliary Corps shipped us out, was described as a world of considerable cultural complexity and ongoing military significance. Which is exactly the kind of bureaucratic language that means. This place is complicated, people have very specific feelings about things, and whatever you do, don't step on any metaphorical toes. I had been traveling for 18 hours. The FTL transit from Earth's Gateway Station to Drekon Minor's orbital ring had taken about 4 of those hours, but the 4 hours before that had been processing, which involved 3 different scanning arrays, 2 medical checks, 1 very thorough ID verification procedure, where a Verti customs officer stared at my human ears for about 45 seconds without saying anything. And then a shuttle transit that was delayed, because of something no one would explain to me in any language I understood. I was tired, I was disoriented. My internal clock was arguing with itself. The Terran Auxiliary Corps had sent me Marcus Elliott Vane, Junior Cultural Liaison, 27 years old, certified in basic Verti phrase dialect and intermediate Krelish sign language, holder of 1 unremarkable degree in xenosociology from the University of Edinburgh, to Vethara Station for a 6-month assignment. My job was supposed to be simple: administrative support for the human diplomatic presence on the station, paperwork, translation assistance. Maybe some cultural mediation if the cafeteria situation got tense again. I had heard from the guy I was replacing that the cafeteria situation got tense sometimes. That was all it was supposed to be. I was not supposed to accidentally enlist in anything. And yet, the night it happened, or what passed for night on an orbital station, which was really just the period when they dimmed the main corridor lighting by about 30%, and the ambient hum of the ventilation systems dropped half a pitch. I had made one decision that changed everything. I couldn't sleep. My bunk in the temporary human quarters was fine, comfortable enough, but my body still thought it was afternoon, and my mind was doing that thing it does when I'm in a new place, cataloging every sound, every vibration, every unfamiliar smell. The station had a lot of smells. Metal and recycled air, and something that the Verti seemed to burn in their ceremonial spaces that drifted through the ventilation in thin ribbons, sweet and ancient and completely alien. I figured I'd take a walk, get my bearings. The orientation materials said the station was mostly open to credentialed personnel at all hours, and I had my credentials on a biometric badge clipped to my jacket. I put on my uniform jacket, the plain gray one, TAC Auxiliaries, no rank insignia because I was so junior I barely counted, and I went out into the corridor. Vethara Station was enormous. I want to be clear about the scale of it because it matters. It wasn't a space station the way you picture one from old science fiction shows: cramped corridors, exposed pipes, everything functional and utilitarian. Vethara had been built over 60 years, expanded 4 times, and was now a collaborative effort between 9 different species. It was the size of a small city. The central ring alone was nearly 2 kilometers in diameter, and there were 17 distinct residential and operational sectors, each designed to accommodate the biological preferences of different species. The human sector was on Ring 5. The Verti military presence was on Ring 4. I knew this because I'd read the orientation materials. What I hadn't fully internalized was the layout, because I had only been on the station for about 14 hours, and I'd spent most of that time in processing, and then trying unsuccessfully to sleep. I walked. The corridors at this hour were quiet but not empty. I passed 2 Krelish maintenance workers who nodded at me with that slow, deliberate nod they use, the one that means something polite, but something I couldn't quite remember the precise nuance of. I passed a Dravathi merchant whose cargo cart hummed quietly on its magnetic rails. I passed what I think was a young Verti civilian who looked at me with the wide, bright curiosity that young Verti always have when they see humans. We're still something of a novelty for them. The strange, warm-blooded bipeds who showed up less than a century ago and immediately started doing things that didn't make sense to anyone. I was following the blue line on the floor. The orientation packet said the blue line led to the common observation deck, which had a view of Drekun Minor's atmosphere and was supposed to be the most peaceful spot on the station. I figured if I couldn't sleep, I might as well look at a planet. But here's the thing about being tired and disoriented on a space station at 4 in the morning. The blue line branches. I didn't see it branch. I was thinking about something else. I think I was thinking about the cafeteria situation, actually, trying to remember what exactly the guy I was replacing had told me. And I followed the line around a curve and through a pressure door, and then down a corridor that felt slightly different from the ones I'd been in before. The floor material changed. Instead of the composite gray of Ring 5, it was something darker, a deep charcoal almost black, with a subtle texture to it that I could feel even through my boots. The lighting was different too, more focused, directional, creating defined pools of blue-white light at regular intervals. The ambient temperature was a degree or two cooler. I noticed all of this in the vague, half-present way of someone who is tired and not fully attending to their surroundings. What I did not notice, not right away, was the symbol above the pressure door I had just walked through. I found out later what it meant. The symbol, a kind of 7-pointed configuration with a central element that the Verti call the Vethkara, meaning roughly, the blade that chooses, marked the entrance to the restricted operational sector of the 7th Verti Citadel Guard. Not just any guard unit, the elite unit, the one with the history going back 400 years, the one that had fought in 3 interstellar conflicts and never lost a citadel. The one that was composed, entirely and exclusively, of Verti women. I didn't know any of this when I walked through the door. I knew approximately none of it. What I knew in the next approximately 90 seconds was this. The corridor I had entered was not the observation deck corridor. There were beings in it. They were very tall. Verti are tall as a species, averaging around 2 meters. But these ones had the particular kind of presence that tall people have when they are also clearly in excellent physical condition and also staring at you. Their skin, which is naturally a deep violet gray, had the slightly different quality that I would later learn comes from the ceremonial oil Verti elite warriors use during off-duty hours. It catches the light differently, a slight iridescence. Their eyes, 4 of them per individual, arranged in the characteristic Verti configuration, were all on me. There were 6 of them in the corridor. 5 were seated on the long benches that ran along the walls, in various states of what looked like post-exercise relaxation. 1 was standing at a station panel, doing something with her hands that was clearly routine until the moment I walked in. None of them moved. They all looked at me. I looked at them. My brain, operating at reduced capacity due to sleep deprivation, produced the following sequence of thoughts in rapid succession. These are Verti, military, female. I think the secondary crest markings look like the female configuration from the orientation materials. This corridor is not the observation deck. I have made a wrong turn. I should probably say something. What came out of my mouth was, and I am not proud of this, but I am committed to accuracy, the following. Oh, hi, sorry, I think I'm in the wrong. Is this the blue line? It was blue. I followed the blue line. Dead silence. Not hostile silence. Not amused silence. Just absolute, complete, total silence, the kind that means a room full of people has collectively decided they are not yet sure what they're looking at. The one standing at the panel turned fully toward me. She was taller than the others by a noticeable margin, which in retrospect I should have clocked as significant. Her secondary crests, the distinctive ridges that Verti have along the sides of their skulls, were a darker shade, almost black, against her violet-gray skin. She was wearing what I would later learn was the off-duty informal uniform of the Vethkara 7th, which looked to my human eyes like very serious athletic, wear in deep gray and gold. She said something in Verti. My Verti was, at that point, basic. I caught maybe 1 word in 4 on a good day. But even I caught the inflection, which was the Verti equivalent of, explain yourself immediately and make it good. I held up my badge, my biometric TAC auxiliary badge, with my name and my designation and the little blue stripe that indicated I was credentialed for general station access. Human, I said as if this were not completely obvious. Terran Auxiliary Corps, I'm lost, sorry, the blue line, I was following it. The tall one looked at my badge. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at the badge again with one pair of her eyes while the other pair stayed on my face, which is a thing Verti can do and which I found extremely disconcerting. She said something else. One of the seated ones said something in response. There was a brief exchange, and 2 or 3 of them made a sound that I would later understand was a Verti expression of resigned amusement, a kind of low, controlled exhale through the nasal ridge. The tall one looked at me again. Then she said, very precisely and very deliberately, in what I would come to recognize as accented but structurally excellent standard galactic common. The blue line on Ring 5 goes to the observation deck. The blue line on Ring 4 goes to the Vethkara tactical briefing sector. The lines are the same color because the color coding system on this station was designed without adequate interspecies coordination and has been a source of navigation errors for 11 years. I blinked. Oh. Yes, she said. I'm sorry, I said. I should go back. I didn't mean to. You walked through a credentialed access door, she said. Your badge permitted the door to open. I didn't know. No, she agreed. She studied me for a moment with all 4 eyes. You didn't know. There was a pause that lasted about 5 seconds. It felt considerably longer. Human, she said, what is your function on this station? Cultural liaison, I said. Administrative support for the Terran diplomatic presence. I just arrived 14 hours ago. Another pause. Another exchange in Verti between the seated women that I couldn't follow. The tall one's expression and Verti facial expressions are hard for humans to read. The muscles operate differently. The cultural vocabulary is distinct, shifted into something I couldn't identify. Not hostile. Not warm. Somewhere in between, or possibly neither, just something I had no reference point for. A cultural liaison, she said slowly, new to the station. Yes, I said. Who walked through a restricted military access door at the 4th hour. I genuinely followed the wrong line, I said. I can show you on the map. I came from the Terran quarters, and I was going to the observation deck, and the corridor curved, and I didn't see the branch point end. I believe you, she said. That stopped me. Oh, I said. Only someone completely unaware of what this place is would walk in here the way you did, she said. You had no hesitation and no fear. I didn't know there was anything to be afraid of, I said honestly. The low exhale sound happened again, from multiple directions this time. More of them. The one nearest me on the bench made it with a particular quality that I would eventually learn was Verti laughter, genuine, if understated. The tall one was quiet for a moment. Then she said something in Verti to the others. I caught about half of it, which was more than I expected. 2 words in particular I was confident about, Terran and Vethsola. I didn't know what Vethsola meant yet. She looked back at me. The observation deck is back through the pressure door, she said. Take the left branch. The blue line will split, follow the one that also has a white marker alongside it. That one goes to Ring 5. Thank you, I said, and then, because I genuinely felt bad about it, I'm sorry for interrupting your whatever you were doing. Recovery period, she said. Right, sorry. I took a step back toward the door. I'm Marcus, by the way, Marcus Vane. I wasn't sure why I said that, force of habit. My mother raised me to introduce myself. She looked at me for one more moment. Vethkara Shanaris, she said, Commander 7th Elite Unit. And then she turned back to the panel. I went back through the pressure door. I found the split in the blue line. I followed the one with the white marker. I sat on the observation deck and looked at Drekon Minor for 45 minutes and thought about how I was going to explain to my superior, Lieutenant Farron, that I had accidentally walked into the restricted quarters of the most elite military unit on the station on my first night. Then I decided I wasn't going to explain it. I was going to go to sleep, wake up, go to my first day of work, and never think about that corridor again. That plan lasted approximately 22 hours. My first full day of work was exactly what they'd told me it would be. Lieutenant Commander Farron, who had the permanently tired expression of someone who has been doing diplomatic administrative work for 8 years and has long since abandoned any romantic ideas about the nature of interspecies relations, shook my hand, showed me my desk, which was in a small office off the main human diplomatic suite on Ring 5, and handed me a stack of digital files. "Translation review," she said. "These are communications logs from the last 30 days that flagged for potential cultural miscommunication. Your job is to go through them and identify anything that might have created unintended impressions. Think of it like a linguistic cleanup." "Okay," I said. "Is this most of what I'll be doing?" "For the first few weeks, yes," she said. "Once you're oriented, you'll do real-time translation support for some of the lower-level meetings. Nothing critical. We have 2 senior translators for anything that actually matters." "And the cafeteria situation?" I asked. She looked at me sharply. "What did Becker tell you?" "Just that there was a situation," I said. She sighed. "There's not a situation anymore. There was a situation 3 months ago involving a question of food preparation protocols that intersected with Verkti ceremonial dietary law in a way nobody had anticipated, and the senior translator handled it. It's fine. The cafeteria on level 3 has 2 designated preparation zones now. It's fine." "Okay," I said. "Don't say cafeteria situation to anyone from the Verkti diplomatic office," she said. "They find it reductive." "Got it." She left me with the files. I sat down and started reading. The job was genuinely interesting, actually. The kind of linguistic miscommunication that crops up in interspecies communication logs is endlessly varied and weirdly fascinating. There was an incident where a human trade representative had used a phrase that translated into Krellish as something deeply personal about the Krellish negotiator's mother. There was one where a Verkti official's formal statement of respect had been translated by an automated system as a moderate-level threat. There was one, my personal favorite, where a human junior aide had tried to express sympathy for a Drevathi colleague's difficult week and had accidentally communicated, in Drevathi cultural context, that they were deeply envious of the colleague's suffering and considered it a mark of high status. I could see why they needed humans who were actually paying attention to this stuff. I was 3 hours into the files when my badge calmed. I looked at it. The contact ID was listed as Vethkara 7th Administrative Relay. I looked at it for a moment. Then I answered. "Vane," I said. A voice I didn't recognize, female, Verkti, clipped and formal. "Cultural Liaison Vane. Commander Shanaris requests a brief communication at your earliest availability today." I held very still. "Commander Shanaris. 7th Elite Unit." "Right," I said. Yes, I can communicate whenever is convenient for the commander." 12th hour, Ring 4, Corridor 7, Conference Alcove," the voice said. "Do you require navigation assistance?" "I have a map," I said. "Confirmed, 12th hour." The line closed. I sat at my desk and looked at the wall for about 30 seconds. Then I went and knocked on Lieutenant Commander Farron's door. She looked up. "The commander of the 7th Elite Unit wants to speak with me," I said. She put down her work. "What?" "I may have accidentally walked through their sector last night," I said. "I couldn't sleep and I was following the wrong blue line and—" "Marcus," she said, "you've been on this station for 22 hours. "I know." She looked at me with the expression of someone calculating exactly how much of a problem this might be. "What happened?" "Nothing bad," I said quickly. I think she was polite, the commander. She explained the navigation issue with the blue lines. She told me how to get to the observation deck. That was it. Farron stared at me, "And now she wants to speak with you." "Yes." "Did you do anything? Say anything." I introduced myself. She told me her name and rank. I apologized for interrupting. And I left." Farron was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The Vethkara 7th hasn't voluntarily requested contact with a human auxiliary since the station opened. We've had human presence here for 6 years. They have had 0 initiated contact with any human below the rank of senior diplomat. 0. I looked at her. So that's either good or bad. I genuinely don't know, she said. Go, be respectful, do not use slang. Do not make jokes unless she makes one first, and even then think very carefully. Do not touch anything without being invited to. If she offers you something to drink, you accept and then you hold it. Do not ask her military history directly. If she wants you to know something, she'll tell you. Okay, I said. Report back immediately after, she said. I mean immediately. Call me from the corridor outside if you have to. Got it. She turned back to her desk, then stopped. Marcus. Yeah. You're sure she wasn't hostile? She laughed, I said. Well, I think she laughed. It was the exhale thing. Farron blinked. Shanaris laughed. Some of them did. I think it was because I said I didn't know there was anything to be afraid of. She stared at me. That's all I said. I didn't do anything brave. I was just lost. Yeah, she said slowly. Go to the meeting. Ring 4 at the 12th hour was different from the Ring 4 I'd stumbled through at 4 in the morning. There were more people in the corridors, a mix of Verti military personnel, a few Krellish technicians, a small cluster of Drevathi in civilian clothes who appeared to be on some kind of tour. The lighting was full operational, bright and precise. The air smelled more strongly of that floral lightning combination, which I was starting to identify as a ventilation additive the Verti military used. Something to do with maintaining alertness. I'd read, though the precise mechanism wasn't clear to me. Corridor 7 was easy to find with the proper map. The conference alcove was a small room off the main corridor with a door that was open when I arrived. Inside, a table, 2 chairs facing each other, and Shanaris. She was in full uniform now, not the informal off-duty where I'd seen the night before. The Vethkara 7th dress uniform was, to human eyes, extraordinary, deep black with the deep gold piping, and on the right shoulder a stylized crest in gold that was, I would later learn, the unit's symbol. The Vethkara, the blade that chooses. Her secondary crests were tied back in a formal configuration that I didn't have language for yet, but that communicated seniority and authority in a way I could feel even without understanding it. She stood when I came in, which is, as I would find out later, something senior Verti military personnel almost never do for juniors. Cultural liaison vein, she said. Commander Shanaris, I said, and then I did the thing my xenosociology professor had drilled into us. I brought my right hand across my chest in the Verti formal greeting gesture, the Vehtari, which indicates acknowledgement of a person's position and status. Not a bow, not a salute exactly, more like a physical statement of, I see who you are and I mean no disrespect. She went very still. I had a half-second of panic where I thought I'd done it wrong. The Vehtari has variations, and the wrong one in the wrong context is worse than nothing, and I'd practiced it from written descriptions and a video resource, not from a live person. But then she made the gesture back to me, slightly modified the senior version which I recognized, and she sat, which was my signal to sit. You know the Vehtari, she said. Studied Verti cultural protocol, I said. The course was 3 months. I'm still not confident about a lot of it. Your form was acceptable, she said. Better than acceptable. Thank you, I said. She folded her hands on the table in front of her and looked at me with that full 4-eyed attention that I was going to have to get used to. There's something about being looked at by 4 eyes simultaneously that your nervous system registers differently than being looked at by 2. Not threatening, just more complete, like being seen more thoroughly. You came to the wrong corridor last night, she said. Yes. This has happened before, she said. The navigation error, twice in 6 years. Both times the individuals who made the error, one Krellish administrative worker, one Drevathi customs officer, immediately understood their mistake. They apologized before I could speak. They backed through the door in physical distress. I thought about this, and I didn't. You did not, she said. You stood in the center of the room and told me about the blue line. I felt a flush of embarrassment. I really didn't know. I said I believed you, she said. I still do, but I found myself curious about something after you left, and curiosity is not a feeling I ignore. What were you curious about? She was quiet for a moment. When Verti are thinking, they have a slight stillness to them, a quality of complete physical composure that looks different from human stillness. Human stillness is the absence of movement. Verti stillness is something more deliberate, more controlled. You are not frightened, she said. In a room full of Vethkara 7th warriors, in our sector, at the 4th hour, you were not frightened. I didn't have time to be, I said honestly. And then it turned out you were explaining the blue line to me so. If you had known who we were, she said, would you have been frightened? I thought about it. Maybe. No, probably not. I mean, it depends on whether I thought I was in trouble. If I'd known I'd walked into a restricted area, I'd have been worried about the professional consequences. But frightened of you personally, I don't think so. She tilted her head slightly. Why not? Because you weren't doing anything threatening, I said. You were sitting down, resting. The one nearest the door was eating something. You were off duty. People off duty are people. I've lived in a city for most of my life. I've been in a lot of situations where I was the only human in the room. You learn to read the actual situation rather than just the surface impression. The actual situation, she repeated. You weren't trying to scare me. You were just surprised to see me. Once I understood that, there wasn't anything to be frightened of. The almost silence again, the thinking stillness. Cultural liaison vein, she said. How long have you been assigned to Vethara Station? 23 hours now, I said. She made the exhale sound, once. A single controlled breath, quiet and precise, and I was almost certain it was the Verti laugh. I have a request, she said. It is unconventional. I want to be clear about that before I make it. Okay, I said. My unit has been the subject of 3 separate cultural observation requests from human researchers and diplomatic observers over the past 4 years, she said. We have declined all 3. Our protocols, our history, our ceremonies, these are not exhibition material. We are not a cultural artifact to be documented for human academic interest. I completely understand that, I said. However, she said, there is a distinction between a human coming to observe us and a human liaison who walks through our door by accident and talks to us about a blue line. I looked at her. There are things about the Verti military structure, specifically the structure of female elite units, the history of the Vethkara, that are consistently misrepresented in the materials human cultural staff receive. I have read the orientation documents your corps uses. They are not inaccurate in the facts they include, but they are incomplete in ways that create misunderstanding. That's yes, I said. That was my impression too, actually, from what I was reading today. She looked at me. What were you reading? Communication logs, I said. My job is to review them for cultural miscommunication flags. There's a pattern I noticed in the exchanges involving Verti female military personnel specifically. Human communicators default to a formality register that's actually too high. It reads as distancing, almost as condescending, like they're being careful not to offend rather than actually engaging. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think that reads as more uncomfortable than just talking normally would. She was very still. Did I get that wrong? I asked. No, she said. You did not get that wrong. The automated translation systems don't catch register, I said. They catch words and grammar, but register is half the communication, maybe more. Another pause, longer this time. Cultural liaison vein, she said. Would you be willing to meet with my unit informally? Not as an observer, not as a researcher. As a liaison, the function your title actually describes. I looked at her. You want me to actually liaise? I want someone who talks about blue lines, she said, and the exhale sound was unmistakable this time, rather than someone who is being careful not to offend me. I thought about it. I thought about what Farron would say. I thought about 6 years of 0 initiated contact and 3 declined observation requests, and the fact that the commander of the 7th Elite Unit had just made an informal request to a TAC auxiliary with 23 hours on the station. Yes, I said, I'd be glad to. I told Farron. She sat in her chair without speaking for about 15 seconds. Then she said she wants ongoing informal meetings. Yes. With you. Yes. Marcus, she said carefully, do you understand what the Vethkara 7th is? Elite unit, 400 years of history, never lost a citadel, composed entirely of women. Your orientation materials describe them as. I don't mean the facts, she said. I mean, do you understand culturally? Among the Verti, the female elite units are not just military organizations. It's complicated. They're also cultural custodians, ceremonial authorities. The Vethkara in particular traces its lineage back to the founding period of the Verti citadel system. Shanaris isn't just a unit commander. She holds a position that doesn't have a direct human equivalent. Something between a general and a high priest and a judge. Okay, I said. And she wants to meet informally with a junior auxiliary who's been on the station for a day. She said I talked about the blue line instead of being careful. Farron stared at me. What does that mean? I think it means she's tired of people being so formal and careful around her unit that they're not actually communicating, that the careful treatment is its own form of condescension. Farron was quiet. That's actually a sophisticated observation. I noticed it in the communication logs, I said. The formality register pattern. I've been here 6 years, she said. She stopped. Fine, yes, you have my authorization. But Marcus, I need you to understand that you are not authorized to make any commitments on behalf of the human diplomatic mission. You are a cultural liaison. You liaise. You do not negotiate, you do not make promises, and if anything comes up that feels like it's moving toward official territory, you tell me immediately. Understood. And for the love of everything, she said, be careful. With respect, I said, I think that's exactly the wrong approach. She looked at me. Shanaris said she wanted someone who wasn't being careful not to offend her. If I go in there being careful, I'm giving her exactly what she's asking me not to give her. Farron thought about this for a long time. You might be right, she finally said. God help us all, you might be right. The second meeting was 3 days later. This time I knew where I was going. The Vethsola, I had looked it up by then. I'd done a lot of reading in those 3 days, pulling everything I could find on the Vethkara history, Verti female military culture, the ceremonial traditions of the elite units. Most of what I found was either too general or too academically distant, but I pieced together enough. Vethsola means, approximately, the one who walks through without knowing. It's an old word. Ancient, really. It appears in Verti military texts from the early Citadel period. Its meaning is specific. It refers to someone who enters a sacred or restricted space without fear, not through bravado or aggression, but through simple unawareness, and whose unawareness turns out to reveal something true about them. Because in Verti tradition, fear of a sacred space is appropriate. Fear means you understand the weight of it and you're navigating carefully. But no, fear means something different. It means you're either a fool or you're someone who, at some fundamental level, belongs. The Vethkara had a tradition of the Vethsola, the accidental entrant. Throughout their 400-year history, there had been several. Individuals who wandered in, through confusion, through accident, through some circumstance they couldn't have predicted, and whose behavior in that first moment revealed something that the Vethkara found significant. I am not saying I am one of those historical figures. I want to be very clear about that. I am a 27-year-old with an unremarkable xenosociology degree who followed the wrong blue line. But that's what Shanaris had said to the others that first night. Vethsola, that was the word she'd used. I sat with that information for a while, then I went to the meeting. It was in a different space this time. Not the corridor, not the conference alcove, but a room I hadn't seen before. It was the kind of room that, when you stepped into it, immediately told you that it was used for something different from the spaces around it. The dimensions were the same as any other meeting room in Ring 4, but the floor was covered with a dark material I didn't recognize, and along one wall were 7 recessed niches, each containing an object, a blade, a document case, what looked like a stone of some kind, and others I couldn't clearly make out from the entrance. 6 of the women from my first night were in the room, plus Shanaris. They were in informal uniforms this time, not the full dress. Something close to what I'd seen that first night, but slightly more formal. The gold piping was there on all of them now. They were seated in a semicircle, not facing a desk or a table, facing each other and facing the space in the middle. Shanaris gestured to the space. I walked into it. I didn't hesitate, I just went. The one nearest me on the left made the exhale sound immediately. Shanaris looked at her, then at me. Kethara notes that you entered without pausing. Was I supposed to pause? I asked. Most people who enter this room for the first time stop at the threshold, she said. to orient themselves, to understand what they're walking into. I trust you, I said. You wouldn't have invited me here if you wanted me to be uncomfortable. Silence, and then multiple exhale sounds, overlapping from different directions. And then something I hadn't heard yet, a louder sound, more full, from the tall one on the far right, who covered her nasal ridge with one hand as she made it. Verkte laughter, actual Verkte laughter, I know that now. At the time I just knew it felt different from the previous sounds, more genuine, less controlled. Kethara, said Shanaris in Verkte, and then something I only partially caught, and I think Kethara said something back that made two others laugh again. Shanaris looked at me. You don't understand Verkte well enough yet to follow this. I caught maybe a third of it, I said. Something about not thinking or not knowing. Kethara said you are either very brave or you have no capacity for self-preservation, she said. I said probably the latter. She said probably both. Kethara might be right, I said. Both, said Kethara in accented galactic common. Definitely both. I looked at her. You speak common. We all speak common, she said. We chose to speak Verkte with you because we wanted to see how much you understood. I looked around the room, testing me. Observing, said Shanaris, there's a difference. And your comprehension is better than your confidence in it, she said. You catch more than you think. I filed that away. So, I said, what's this meeting for exactly? The first one I understood you wanted to talk about the communication pattern issue, but this seems like... I looked at the semicircle, the niche objects, the room itself. This seems like something else. It is, she said. Sit if you'd like. There was a low platform in the center of the space that I'd taken for part of the floor. It was, in fact, a seat. I sat on it. They looked at me. My unit has questions, Shanaris said. About humans, not diplomatic questions, not formal cultural inquiry. Questions they've had for some time that there has been no appropriate avenue to ask. Okay, I said, ask. You're certain? Yes. The woman to the right of Shanaris, Velhari, whose name I would later learn, with a long facial scar that ran diagonally across her lower two eyes, leaned forward slightly. Why do humans sing? She said. I mean in non-ceremonial contexts, working, walking. What is the function? I looked at her. We just like to, it feels good, it helps pass time. Sometimes a song is in your head and it comes out. Without ritual context, I confirmed. She leaned back, made a contemplative sound, said something to the one beside her in rapid Verkte. She's been wondering for 3 years, Kethara translated, apparently for my benefit. She heard a human engineer singing while repairing a conduit on level 6. It confused her very much. It's just something we do, I said. Like, right now I've had the same fragment of an old folk song stuck in my head since this morning. I'll probably hum it without realizing later. What is the song? Velhari asked. I thought about it. Then, feeling slightly self-conscious, I hummed about 8 bars of the chorus. It echoed oddly in the room. Complete silence. Then the exhale sound from someone, then another, then the full sound from the tall one on the far right again. What? I said. It sounds like nothing we expected, Kethara said. We've heard human music through recordings, but from the source in this room, it's different. Different how? She thought about it. It carries weight, she said, more than I expected. I told you I was going to sound self-conscious, I said. That was my self-conscious version. More laughter. What's the less self-conscious version? Shanaris said. That you don't want to hear, I said. Trust me. The questions kept coming. For 2 hours they came. Why do humans apologize for things they didn't cause? They explained the concept of empathetic apology versus responsible apology in about 6 different ways before I felt like I'd done it justice. Why do human emotional expressions leak into professional contexts, the faces, the voices, when Verkte training maintains professional composure consistently? I tried to explain that human emotional expression is partly involuntary, which produced a very long silence. Why do humans form deep bonds with non-human animals? Kethara had a very specific follow-up about whether the bond was spiritual or practical. I said both, usually. Why do human military units have? Velhari struggled for the word. and then produced it in Verti, which I caught well enough to translate as something like informal internal humor systems. Jokes, essentially. Why do human soldiers make jokes? Because, I said, we're afraid, and jokes are how we hold the fear at a distance we can manage. That one landed differently. I could feel it in the room, a quality of attention that sharpened. Shanaris said quietly, "You said you were not afraid. Last night, you said you didn't know there was anything to be frightened of." "In that situation, no," I said. "In general, yeah, humans are afraid of a lot. We just try not to let it run us." "And jokes," she said. "Jokes," I confirmed. "Songs, food, talking, sitting together, all the things you do to keep fear from being the only thing in the room." Shanaris looked at me for a long time. "Your species is very young," she said. It wasn't unkind. "In galactic terms. Less than a century of interstellar contact." "I know," I said. "You are still afraid of many things," she said. "Yes. And yet," she said, "you walk into rooms without pausing at the threshold." "I'm working on the balance," I said. The full sound from the tall one on the far right, then Kethara, then Velhari, and then controlled, precise but unmistakable Shanaris herself. Not the exhale sound, something more than that. Part 4, the incident on level 9. I need to tell you about what happened on level 9. I need to tell you this because it's the part that ended up in my TAC record, and it's the part that got me cited by Commander Shanaris in an official communication. And it's the part that apparently ended up on an honor tile in the 7th Verti Citadel, which I still think is completely disproportionate to what I actually did. But I'll let you decide. It was about 6 weeks into my assignment. By that point, the informal meetings had become a semi-regular thing, roughly every 4 or 5 days, varying the time and the space. Sometimes it was the semicircle room. Sometimes it was a less formal location. There was a maintenance observation window on the outer ring of level 4 with a view of deep space that Kethara had shown me, and we'd talked there twice. Sometimes 1 or 2 members of the unit would simply fall into step with me in a corridor, and we'd have half a conversation while walking somewhere. I had learned all 7 of their names by then. Shanaris, Commander, Kethara, Second, the one who had first used the full laugh sound. Velhari, the one with the scar, the one who'd asked about singing. Morith, the tall one on the far right, who it turned out had the driest wit of any being I'd met, Verti or human. Surath, who was quietest and most precisely observed everything before she spoke. Renovar, who asked the most detailed questions about human food, and seemed to find my explanations of things like birthday cake deeply philosophically significant. And Yeska, youngest of them, who looked at me with an intensity that I eventually understood as the Verti version of genuine open curiosity. I also had, by this point, learned enough Verti to follow most of their conversations. Shanaris had started correcting my pronunciation in passing, which felt like a compliment disguised as something practical. I had not told most of the human diplomatic staff the full extent of these interactions. I had told Farron everything. She was briefed. She had raised the situation with the senior diplomatic officer twice, and the consensus was to let it continue because the alternative was to actively tell the commander of the Vethkara 7th that we didn't want the liaison contact she was initiating, which was obviously not a thing we were going to do. 6 weeks in on a Thursday, they don't actually call it Thursday on the station. The station calendar is different, but it was the day that felt like Thursday. You know what I mean? Something happened on level 9. Level 9 was the commercial sector of the station. Vendors, food markets, small businesses, a mix of species and transient visitors and permanent residents. It was the most chaotic part of the station, the most human feeling in some ways, the loud one. I liked level 9. I was on level 9 on my lunch break. Not official business, just getting food. There was a Dravathi stall that sold something that wasn't technically noodles but was close enough to scratch the itch, and I'd developed a mild attachment to it. I was waiting for my order when I heard the sound. Not loud, not dramatic, just wrong. The particular quality of raised voices that cuts through ambient noise not because of volume but because of pitch. The specific kind of tension that a crowd of people generates when something is happening that they're not sure whether to involve themselves in. I looked. At the far end of the commercial corridor, maybe 30 meters away, there was a confrontation of some kind. I couldn't see it clearly through the crowd, which had done the thing crowds do. Some people pressing closer to look, others pressing away to create distance. I moved toward it, not because I'm a hero, because I'm a cultural liaison and it was my job to move toward things like that, and because the alternative was to stand there with my almost noodles and watch. What I found when I got close enough to see: three large beings, Krorath, a species I recognized from the briefing materials, heavy-gravity worlders, big with the segmented physical structure and the visual processing that gives them slightly different situational awareness than most biped species. And they had backed a small group of what I realized with a jolt were young Verti. Not soldiers, civilians. Young ones, adolescent by the look of their crest development, maybe 14 or 15 by Verti age equivalent. The Krorath were not, as far as I could tell, doing anything that technically qualified as a physical threat. But they were using size and proximity in a specific, deliberate way, and the young Verti were against the wall, and the one in the center was holding very still with the tension of someone who is trying hard not to show fear. And the surrounding crowd, 7 or 8 bystanders of various species, were watching. No one was intervening. I understood in about 3 seconds what was happening and why. The Krorath were not technically doing anything. There was no obvious escalation point where a bystander could step in and have a clear justification. The Verti were young and not in distress in any way that would trigger an emergency protocol. This was a situation that existed in the space between rules, the gray zone of intimidation without explicit threat. I am a cultural liaison. I have no enforcement authority. I am not trained in conflict resolution beyond basic diplomatic mediation principles. I am 27 years old with an unremarkable xenosociology degree. I walked over. I put myself between the Krorath and the young Verti, not aggressively, not with any kind of dramatic gesture. I just walked into the space and stood there. The Krorath looked at me. I looked at them. "Hey," I said in galactic common, in the most casual tone I possessed. "Sorry to interrupt. I'm trying to get to the Drevathi noodle stall. Can you tell me if it's up the corridor or down?" Dead silence. "I'm asking because the signage on this level is confusing," I said. "It's the one with the green awning, or what passes for an awning. I'm not sure what the right word is in common. Do you know it?" The Krorath were staring at me, all 3 of them. Krorath sensory processing means they often appear to be staring. Their visual apparatus doesn't move the way most species' eyes do, but this particular quality of attention was recognizable regardless. "I don't know it," the nearest one said, slowly, in common, with an accent but clearly. "Worth a shot," I said. "Thanks," I half-turned. To the young Verti, I said, "I'm actually going to a stall on level 9. Do you know this area? I'm a bit lost. Could you help me find it?" The one in the center, the one who'd been holding still, looked at me, 4 wide eyes. Then, with a precision that impressed me even in the moment, she straightened. "I know it," she said in perfect common. "Follow me." I followed her. The other young Verti fell in around us and we walked up the corridor. Behind me, the Krorath didn't follow. When we were far enough away, the girl, whose name I learned was Vethali, which was a coincidence of syllables that Shanaris would find interesting later, looked at me. "You are human," she said. "Yes," I said. "You walked in front of them." "Yes." "You were not afraid." "I was a bit afraid," I said honestly. "But they weren't technically doing anything I could call them on, and the best move was to break the geometry, change what the situation looked like. Crowds follow whatever the first move sets." She stared at me. "You know this." "I grew up in a city," I said. "On Earth you learn." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You are the one who walks through without knowing." I froze. "Excuse me," I said. "The Veth Sola," she said. "They say there is a human Veth Solar on the station. My mother said she said the 7th unit." She stopped. "Who's your mother?" I asked. Lee looked at me steadily. "Morith," she said. "Morith of the 7th. I stared at her. "The tall one," I said, somewhat stupidly. "She is tall," Vethali agreed, with the unmistakable quality of Verti dry humor that I had learned to recognize, because I'd spent the last 6 weeks in the presence of someone who deployed it regularly. "Oh," I said. "She told me about the blue line," Vethali said. "Right," I said. "She said you were funny." I looked at this 14-year-old Verti girl who had been backed against a wall 30 seconds ago, and was now talking to me with the perfect composure of someone who had been raised by a member of an elite unit. "I'm going to tell your mother I ran into you," I said. "She'll want to know," Vethali agreed. Morith's reaction when I told her was complicated. She went very still. Then she said something in Verti that I caught about half of but understood well enough. Then she made a single controlled sound that I recognized as the full laugh sound, very brief, very tightly controlled. Then she said, "She is fine." "She's fine," I confirmed. "She handled herself perfectly well. Better than most people would." "She is 7th bloodline," Morith said, with a particular quality in her voice that was it's hard to translate. "Pride is too simple. Recognition is closer. This is how things should be," that was what it communicated. "She said you told her about the blue line," I said. Morith looked at me. "I tell my daughter things that are worth knowing." "She said you said I was funny." Morith made the controlled sound again. "I said you were amusing. There is a difference." "What's the difference?" "Funny is a quality of the moment. Amusing is a quality of the person." I thought about that. I think humans use the words interchangeably. "I know," she said. "I find that amusing. The thing about what I did on level 9, the way I've described it, the way Farron describes it in her reports, the way it eventually appeared in my TAC record, sounds deliberate. Brave, even, like I made a tactical decision. But here is what I actually did. I was hungry. I wanted noodles. I saw something that was wrong and I didn't think about it very hard. I just went and stood in front of it because the alternative was to watch, and watching felt bad. And then I talked about a noodle stall because it was the first thing that came into my head. That's it, that's the whole thing. It got around the station faster than I would have imagined possible. Vethali told someone, or Morith told someone, or someone in the crowd had been watching and told someone. Within 24 hours, 2 different Verti colleagues of mine in the Ring 5 administrative sector were looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, but that had a quality to it that made me uncomfortable. Within 48 hours, I got a comm from Shanaris. Not through the administrative relay this time, direct from her personal channel. "Come to the sector tomorrow," she said, 10th hour. "Okay," I said. "Wear your best uniform," she said. "My best uniform is exactly the same as my only uniform," I said. "Then wear your uniform with intention," she said. I had no idea what that meant. The next morning, I put on my uniform. I stood in front of the mirror in my quarters for about 30 seconds and tried to understand what, with intention, meant in this context. Then I made sure everything was pressed and aligned as well as I could manage, which is the only physical expression of intention that I know how to do. I went to the sector at the 10th hour. The room they led me to was not the semicircle room. It was a larger space I hadn't been in before. The floor was the same dark material, but here it extended without interruption across a large open area. There were no furniture pieces, no technology visible. The lighting came from something in the ceiling I couldn't see, indirect, steady, with a slightly warmer tone than the station's standard blue-white. All 7 members of the 7th unit were present. They were in full dress uniform. The deep black, the gold piping, the unit crest, their secondary crests in the formal configuration. Positioned in a specific pattern that I understood after a moment was deliberate, not random, not social, but arranged. Shanaris was at the center. She held something in her hands. I walked in. I did not pause at the threshold. By that point, I had been there often enough that pausing would have felt like going backward, and also I was very much going on instinct because I didn't know what this was. Shanaris said in Verti, "Marcus Elliot Vane, Terran, Veth Solar of the 7th. I understood every word of that. On the station Vethara, in the 41st year of the Citadel Accord, you entered this unit's space without knowing. You spoke plainly and without fear. You returned by invitation and spoke plainly and without fear again. And on the commercial level of this station, you placed yourself between members of this species and a threat, without authority, without weapon, without armor, and without having been asked. And you spoke about a noodle stall." From behind her, from all 6 of the others, came the full sound simultaneously. Not restrained. Full, collective Verti laughter, contained within about 2 seconds, but there and unmistakable. Shanaris looked at me. The Vethkara 7th has a tradition. Those who walk through without knowing and prove themselves worthy of having done so are acknowledged, not as warriors, not as members, but as, the word is Vethali. The one who belongs to this place without being of it. I looked at her. Vethali, I said quietly, that's Morith's daughter's name. From the far right, Morith made a sound. It was the full sound, and it was long, and she did not restrain it. She named her for the tradition, Shanaris said. 14 years ago, before she knew it would ever be relevant. I looked at the thing in Shanaris's hands. It was a piece of cloth, or something like cloth, dark gray, with a single diagonal stripe in Vethkara gold. This is not a unit insignia, she said. It is an acknowledgement. You wear it as you choose. It carries meaning within Verti space, to those who know it says. This one has been recognized by a Citadel unit. Not because they were brave enough, or strong enough, or skilled enough. Because they were true enough. Because what they are, at the fundamental level, is compatible with what we protect. She held it out. I stepped forward and took it. It was heavier than it looked. The texture was remarkable, smooth in one direction, slightly rough in the other. I held it and looked at it. I don't know what to say, I said. You could say something about a blue line, Kethera said from behind Shanaris. Multiple full sounds, even Shanaris, who bent her head slightly and then straightened. Thank you, I said when the room had settled. I don't have a word for this. I want to be honest with you because that seems like the right thing to be given everything. I'm not brave. I'm not a warrior. I'm a cultural liaison who followed the wrong blue line, and then I was too awkward to be scared. And then on level 9, I was just hungry. And I saw something wrong, and my feet took me over there before my brain had finished deciding. I looked around the room, at all 7 of them. At the faces I had learned to read over 6 weeks of conversation, imperfectly but genuinely, the way you learn to read a language not from a book but from actual people speaking it at you. But I'll tell you what I think is true, I said. I think humans are afraid of a lot. I think we spend most of our lives being afraid, and the thing that makes some of us do things that look brave is not that we don't have fear, it's that we've decided, consciously or not, that the fear isn't the most important thing in the room. And the reason we decide that isn't because we're strong. It's because the other thing, the wrong thing happening, the person against the wall, the situation nobody wants to touch, that thing is more uncomfortable than the fear. Silence. We can't stand watching something wrong happen, I said. It physically bothers us. I think it's genetic at this point. We've been doing it for so long, helping when we probably shouldn't, getting involved when we had no standing to be involved, walking into rooms we didn't belong in. I think it's baked in. For better or worse, it's just what we are. Shanaris looked at me for a long moment. Yes, she said, that is what you are. The thing that left me speechless. And this is the thing the title refers to, so I should probably get to it, happened 3 days after the ceremony. I was in the Ring 5 admin suite. It was midday, normal workday. I was reviewing a translation log when the comm lit up with the station-wide channel, which almost never carried anything addressed to individual personnel. It was used for general announcements, emergency protocols, and official station communications. It said my name. My full name. Marcus Elliot Vane, Terran Auxiliary Corps Cultural Liaison. My first thought was that I'd done something wrong. Some administrative consequence I hadn't anticipated. Some protocol I'd violated without realizing it. The message that followed was in Verti and Common simultaneously, which is the standard dual language format for official Verti Terran communications. And it said, by order of Commander Shanaris of the Vethkara 7th, the formal title of Vethali Terran is bestowed upon Marcus Elliot Vane, to be entered into the Citadel Accord record of recognized associates. This recognition carries the following rights and acknowledgments within Verti-administered space. Right of passage through Verti military sectors at the invitation of any senior Vethkara officer. Right of cultural consultation with Verti ceremonial authorities. Right of formal address as Vethali Terran in all official Verti communications. This recognition has not been granted to a non-Verti being in 47 years. It has never been granted to a human. It is granted now to Marcus Elliot Vane because he follows blue lines without knowing where they go, and stands in front of walls and speaks plainly, and is in the assessment of the Vethkara 7th. True. Signed, Shanaris, Commander, 7th Elite Unit, Vethara Station. I sat at my desk. Farron appeared in my doorway about 8 seconds later, which meant she'd been watching the station-wide channel at the same time. Her expression was extraordinary, a combination of things that I don't have one word for. Amazement. Satisfaction. The particular look of someone who has just been proven right about something and is also slightly overwhelmed. Rite of passage through military sectors, she said. That's a diplomatic recognition, Marcus. That's an actual formal diplomatic recognition. I know, I said. That hasn't been given to a non-Verti in 47 years. The message said, and never to a human. The message said that too. She came into the office and sat down across from me, which she'd never done before. Do you understand what this means for the Terran-Verti diplomatic relationship? The cultural implications alone. I followed the wrong blue line, I said. Marcus. I was lost, I said. And then I had conversations, and then I was hungry and I stood in front of some people who were making other people uncomfortable. That's all. She stared at me. You are describing the formal opening of a cultural bridge with the most historically closed military order in Verti civilization, as I was lost. I'm describing what actually happened, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. The orientation materials, she said. The formality register problem in the communication logs. Yes. You saw that in your first day. Yes. I have been here for 6 years, she said. She stopped. I was being careful, she said. We all were. We were being so careful we weren't seeing anything. Yeah, I said gently. And you walked in and said hello and talked about a blue line. In my defense, I said, I genuinely didn't know where I was. She made a sound, not a Verti sound, a very human sound, a kind of laughing exhale, uncontrolled, surprised out of her. She covered her mouth. Then she took her hand down and laughed properly, and it was the realest sound I'd heard from Farron since I'd met her. The honor tile, she said, when she'd composed herself. There's going to be an honor tile in the 7th Verti Citadel. I heard, I said. With your name on it. I know, I said. That's the part that's going to take me a while to process. Shanaris calmed me that evening. I saw the station-wide message, I said. I thought you should know what was happening before the formal notification, she said. I misjudged the timing. I didn't mind, I said. I don't have a Verti word for it yet. Moved, I think, very moved. Vethshari, she said. To be moved by something true, we use it when a thing lands where it should. Vethshari, I said carefully. I need that word. You're welcome to it. I sat with that for a moment, then I said, Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you come get me the second time? I said. After that first night, why the meeting, why all of it? You could have let me go back to Ring 5, and that would have been the whole story. Wrong blue line, polite explanation, back to my regular job. Silence, the thinking stillness. You said something, she said finally. When you were leaving, you said, I'm sorry for interrupting your whatever you were doing. You didn't know what we were doing, and you apologized for interrupting it anyway. Yes, I said. That word, whatever. In Verti, the nearest equivalent carries an implication of dismissal, of condescension. But in the way you used it, the tone you used, it didn't carry that. It carried respect. You were apologizing for interrupting something you didn't understand. And the fact that you didn't understand it didn't reduce how much you respected it. I hadn't thought about that moment particularly. It had been a reflex. I guess, I said, that's because I don't need to understand something for it to matter. Most things matter. Most things that people do seriously, they do seriously for reasons that deserve respect even if I don't fully know what the reasons are. Quiet. That, she said, is why I came and got you. Epilogue 6 months later. My TAC assignment ended. They offered me an extension. A real extension, not auxiliary, but an actual formalized cultural bridge role, new category, the first of its kind, Terran Verti Cultural Integration Specialist. Farron pushed for it hard. The senior diplomatic officer pushed for it. 3 separate Verti administrative officials, apparently, had inquired through formal channels about my continued presence on the station. I took the extension. I've been here 9 months now. The sessions with the 7th unit are still informal. They will always be informal, that's the point of them, I think. Shanaris and I have had approximately 200 conversations since the first one in the corridor conference alcove, ranging from Verti ceremonial history to the optimal preparation of earth noodles to the philosophical underpinnings of military loyalty to why humans cry at music. I have learned to follow most of a Verti conversation now. My pronunciation of the secondary crest signifier syllables is still imperfect but improving. Cathara and I have argued about 11 different topics and agreed on most of them eventually. Velhari asked me to teach her an earth song, which I did badly, but she learned it, and she sings it sometimes in the corridor when she thinks no one's listening. I've heard it. I don't tell her I've heard it. Morith showed me a photograph of Vethali's school achievement ceremony and looked extremely composed about it. Surath gave me a book, a physical book, which is rare about the early Vethkara period in the original Verti, and told me I should read it slowly. I've been reading it for 3 months. It's extraordinary. Renovar has tried 14 earth foods and has strong feelings about all of them. Yeska is learning English, which nobody asked her to do, she just started, because she thought the grammar was interesting. The honor tile in the 7th Verti Citadel does have my name on it. I know because Shanaris showed me an image. It says Vethali Terran Marcus Elliot Vane in the formal Verti script, and underneath in the abbreviated traditional form. He walked through without knowing, and what was true in him was enough. I have been trying to figure out what to do with that sentence for 3 months. I think about the blue line a lot. The navigation error that the station was apparently aware of for 11 years and hadn't fixed. They fixed it about a month after my incident. New markers, clear differentiation, no more identical blue lines going to different places. Shanaris told me, when I mentioned this, that she had submitted the request to fix it approximately 6 times in 6 years. And it was fixed after I walked through, I said. Yes, she said. Because of me. Because of you. I thought you said the lines were an ongoing problem. They were, she said, but apparently a human cultural liaison following the wrong one into a restricted military sector elevated the issue to priority status. The exhale sound. Your species has a gift for making administrative problems move. That's probably the nicest way anyone has ever described our diplomatic presence, I said. The full sound from her, clean and genuine. I keep the Vethali cloth on my desk, the dark gray with the gold stripe. I don't wear it. I'm still not sure I've earned that, in the sense that I understood it, but I like having it where I can see it. It's a reminder of the specific, weird, accidental human thing that got me here. I was tired and hungry and lost, and I followed the wrong line. And because of that, because of the conversations that came from that, the questions about singing and fear and noodle stalls and earth music, and why we cry, 2 species that had been carefully, politely, formally not quite connecting for 6 years, found something that was more real than careful politeness.